only e-commerce conference where you can learn, network, and source all at the same venue. We have actionable content, exciting networking opportunities, and not to mention thousands of suppliers at the trade. If you are an Amazon seller, it's not too late. Buy your ticket at www.globalsources.com/summit.
Dan mentioned earlier, I'm business partners with Dan. We've currently got a team of 12 staff, and we run 10 brands across multiple marketplaces, multiple categories, mainly sourcing from China. Something that I like to specialise in is negotiating better supplier payment terms. So perhaps I can touch on that with some of your questions. Cool.
Okay, cool.
Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Kian Golzari. Thank you very much. I was chatting a little bit earlier about everything to do with my experience in China, which has been living and working there for the last 10 years, opening up an office there, manufacturing for a lot of different brands. My focus and attention isn't really on Amazon. I just sort of view it as a sales channel, but really what I specialise in is sourcing, manufacturing, product development, anything to do with China. So happy to answer all your questions.
Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so my first question is, Sophie, why don't you take this first? So, what do you think is the biggest challenge that Amazon sellers are going to face in the next 12 months when it comes to sourcing from China, and what can they do to address those challenges?
Okay, great. So, the biggest challenge I see is just diminishing returns. There's so many sophisticated sellers. Everybody's hovering over those same research tools, getting the same answers out, 2 clicks. They found your supplier on Alibaba or found your supplier through the new jungle scrapping. So just sticking with the crowd or anything where you're following a blueprint that sounds super easy is likely to be too good to be true. So staying at the front of the pack, to not be easily copied, to not have your supplier able to easily copy the product you offer. So whatever it is that you do to have a point of difference, really thinking that through for a long-term product. So you don't want sort of quick flash in the pan Amazon products. You want to set something up that's going to run for years, not months. And I think something like this Marketplace Pulse newsletter last week, and I had the exact numbers, somebody else might remember them, but something like 30% of the growth on Amazon in the last 12 months was from new Chinese sellers. So you don't want to have them doing what you can do. You want to do something that they can't do.
Glad to go with you.
Yeah, so in terms of the challenge, I think you guys in the room aren't really going to face this challenge, but what I would say is one of the biggest mistakes people have is not coming to China, not building that relationship with the factories direct. So good job, you made the right decision, you came to China and you're sourcing direct, building those relationships with your suppliers directly. And I think that's going to be, that's my main point with my main advice is do that, deal with the suppliers direct, don't rely on just using maybe Alibaba or things like that. Really build a relationship with your suppliers and look at it as more of a partnership with those guys, because you benefit a lot from that.
Yeah, and I think, just to piggyback on the last 2 answers, I think when products can be copied, but brands cannot. So really focus on building your brand as opposed to trying to find quick win products. And the other thing is, as Leiden said as well, really build up your relationship as well, because there's so many benefits you can get from your supplier. Just so many people are just focused on price, but there's so many other benefits you can get in terms of better payment terms. Leiden is really a specialist in cash flow. He's very good at that. We're going to talk in a little bit more detail later on. But really just come out here because you're showing your willingness to do business with them. You've flown all the way here, so they really respect and appreciate that, as opposed to dealing with Amazon sellers who just communicate by email. So you will get a lot more benefits than you actually think just by coming here, and you will learn an incredible amount as well.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so one of the challenges that Amazon sellers have is minimum order quantities. And when they're talking to suppliers online or at trade shows, suppliers like factories don't want to deal with smaller orders, but as Amazon sellers, we don't want to invest that much capital into products, especially if we're not sure that they're going to sell well on Amazon. So Sophie, do you have any tips on how to negotiate for smaller order quantities?
Sure. So one of the things is to pick the right kind of supplier. So a big factory that's used to big orders won't be interested, but somebody who's smaller or who makes handmade products, there's no lower limit. A lot of the products in India, the minimum order's 1. You just decide how many. And at the India trade show, you pretty much pick your own number for most products. There's a few other things as well. One is to skip getting most people do get a sample. I've never got a sample. And instead, I've said, I'll save you all that mucking around and shipping a sample all the way to New Zealand. It holds you up by at least a couple of weeks, and it doesn't really determine the quality of what your next order is going to be. So, who was it this morning talking about the trial orders? No. Somebody talked about trial orders this morning instead of an MOQ. Just that language really makes a difference. People will do a test order or a trial order of 100 or 200 units. And as I said, much rather have a smaller launch. I don't ever pay for those big launch promotional things. I just do a small order. If it runs out of stock, great problem to have. And I'd much rather be that way around than overstocked, big orders, big launches, lots of money into the red before you've had a single sale, and you've got no evidence that people actually want your product at full price when you've done a big aggressive giveaway launch. So start really small and really just shop around for quotes as well.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Yeah, so exactly the same there. We like to approach the trial order or test order thing rather than go down another route and try and argue the MOQ. And one way that we managed to negotiate a small MOQ at the beginning is really outline what the sales forecast is and paint a picture for the longevity. We're focusing on a partnership with the supplier here. We're not just buying one quick order off them. We say listen, I know your MOQ is 5,000 units, but we need to order 1,000. We need to order 2,000 to test the market. If everything goes well, then we're going to be looking to place 5,000 orders for 5,000 units every couple of months. So paint the long-term picture and then explain why you need a lower order quantity to start with. But yeah, just let them know that this isn't a one-time thing. We're looking to build a great partnership here, and it's a long-term thing. And we normally get the okay for a lower first order there.
And how much low do they go? Like, do they go from say 1,000 to 100, or is it like 1,000 to 500?
Well, I wouldn't recommend for Amazon sellers, I wouldn't recommend going as low as 100. Anyway, I like to. The worst thing you can do at the moment is run out of stock because relaunching is so expensive and impossible in a lot of cases. But coming back to your question, it depends on the supply again. And so we cover that as well. Yeah, it all depends on supply. Some suppliers might say they'll do 100. Some suppliers might want 10,000. You've got to remember that every supplier is different. They're different sizes. They've got different cash flows, and you just have to ask that question. And coming to somewhere like this is perfect to sort of get those questions and get practicing.
Yeah, I would also ask your manufacturer what materials are they holding in stock, because quite often they've had other orders from other customers which have been cancelled and are just sitting in their warehouse with tons of fabric or materials that they're just trying to get rid of that have been sitting there for a very, very long time. So I think this morning I gave the example of, if you wanted the red chair and the minimums were 2,000, but if you just said, well, what materials have you got in stock? Oh, we've got black in stock, you can do 300. So really just ask your manufacturer what you can benefit from what they're holding in stock, and also what they're ordering in the future. If they're going to be ordering for big customers, if they're doing business with national retailers, find out what materials they're using, ask if you can use a little bit of their stuff, if they can order a little bit extra for you. And then the other thing is ask, once you start to work in partnership with your supplier and you sort of explain the awareness for a long-term awareness together, it's not just you're my supplier and I'm your customer, like what works for me works for you. What you can ask them is that, okay, I'll place an order for the minimum that's 1,000 pieces or whatever, but right now I only need 300 and I need your support to manufacture the 1,000, but only charge me for the 300. I'll ship the 300 and then you'll just have it there waiting for us in stock. So when you're going to get faster lead times because your goods are manufactured and waiting in their warehouse, and my manufacturers never actually charge us warehouse space, they've got a lot of space, so they can just sort of hold the goods there for you, they've already made it, and then whenever you need it, they just ship it out. But that goes back to building that relationship. You can't just ask for that on day one, you have to build up that rapport.
Okay, so they say that the money is in the sourcing, right? So, Sophie, what are some of the tips that you can share with us to maybe cut costs or increase profitability when importing from China or India?
Well, I think my mic might not be playing game. Is it working? Is it okay? Is it working now?
Can you hear her? Okay.
Hang on now. So the main way to get the profit up is actually to get your sale price up. So you want to get really good quality goods. If you're really pushing people down on price, you're going to have them cut corners. And you can see from the raw materials, when you understand the manufacturing process, how many hours on the production run, how many staff with what level of skill are making this product, that's your cost of goods. And then there's a margin for the factory. So there's just kind of a bit of a cost of goods thing that you need to understand about how your product is best made. And then some of the other step-ups coming up over the next few days around, matching it up to the right customers efficiently and promoting it and launching it efficiently so you get a really good conversion rate and good reviews and then a good sale price. That's the best way to get the higher margin, but finding something that costs cents rather than a couple of dollars isn't necessarily the track to $1 million brand. Sometimes you need to spend a little bit more on the product to be able to sell it for a lot more. So anytime I've sort of tried to, go really cheap, it's sort of looked really cheap as well, or led to other problems. So yeah, don't always race for the bottom. Sometimes, go for the higher sale price.
What about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think the biggest one that I come across when I'm speaking to people is that people are still shipping by air, which is a lot more expensive than by sea. And that might be because they're trying to keep the orders down and keep the stock lean, so they're not shipping so much, placing smaller orders. But I would definitely recommend coming back to my point about thinking further ahead. If you can place a slightly bigger order, you might be able to ship by sea rather than by air and save money there. And if you're placing bigger orders, you might get cheaper pricing from your suppliers as well. So again, coming back to thinking long term, that's something I would definitely take a look at.
Yeah, and I would also say, fully understand the manufacturing process yourself. I think I gave the example in my talk about the backpack. Once you sort of see it on the production line and all different stages that it goes through, you know how to basically bring the price down because you can think about it in so many different elements. And also, as I went over very quickly, but you have to visit your factory because you see a lot of hidden gems that you never would have seen or known about had you not visited. I'll give a quick example. I was in the factory for backpacks, and the fabric rolls are 1.5 meters. So they have these molds of the back panel of the backpack, which may be 25 centimeters. So it cuts 25, 25, 25, 22, whatever it was. And there's this wasted fabric on the edge, and I just saw this wasted fabric coming out. It's like, what do you guys do with this fabric? And they're like, oh, nothing, we just throw it out. And in the UK, we have these items called like gaiters, which go around your boots to protect your trousers and boots when you're walking. So I trained them how to make gaiters with wasted fabrics. I didn't pay for any fabrics for those items, and just quickly I got a product at a very, very low price. I also got them to make wallets out of those items as well. So you learn these things, or you can figure these things out when you go to the factory. So don't just try and conduct all your business by email. You have to do it face to face as well as going to visit as well, because your eyes will be open to a lot more things.
Yeah, and April and October, is actually a good time to visit factories when you're here in Hong Kong and China visiting trade shows. Just extend your trip for a couple of weeks and go visit factories. Okay, so what about Trump tariffs? Crystal ball, Sophie, what do you think is going to happen, in the future for as far as Trump tariffs are concerned?
It's not really my area of expertise. There's things that I listen to the other gurus on. Gary Warren seems to be someone really up to date on that stuff, and he's really well published. People like Forbes, and he actually advises the White House on e-commerce out of China. So he's a good person to follow to stay completely up to date on that. But I do think over time it's going to be really advantageous to source from outside of China, just for a whole range of reasons. But the tariffs is one that came up sort of the last 12 or 24 months or so. But I think just having a bit of diversity in where you're sourcing from gives you more options.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I would say just do some research, understand which of your products might get tariffed, because I think there's going to be different levels. One thing I would say is that it's not just you that's going to have to pay this tariff. All your competitors are going to have to pay this tariff as well. So I'm not saying it's going to happen immediately. It probably won't, because some people have stock and things like that. But not everybody. If that tariff's going to make you not profitable, then all your competitors are having the same extra cost as well. So it's sort of a level playing field anyway. Yes, we might miss out, and we might have to try and put prices up, and we lose a bit on profitability. But it's not just us; everybody's going to have the same issue.
Yeah, kind of still my answer. The good thing is everyone's in the same boat, but the important thing is to do is take action. what I did when I found out about all this like Trump tariffs was I immediately went to Vietnam. I'd never been to Vietnam before. I went about a year ago, got my top selling items, found some new factories for it, got it sampled up, got it priced up, so I know if one day the law changes, I've got someone else set up in another country to just get going. So don't start to think that, okay, when the law changes, I'll go and source it from another country, because you're already a few months behind myself. So just go and take action on it now, because it's so in the air, no one really knows what's going to happen.
Okay, so diversification is important. Okay, so let's see what questions we have here. How do you work out the lowest price the manufacturer can go? Also, what kind of tax returns are the manufacturers getting? So, lowest price. Who wants to take this question?
Not really my area, but
So in terms of negotiating a low price, and this is the same thing I do when trying to get better payment terms, is again, as I've mentioned a couple of times already, is paint the picture, paint the long-term thing, build that relationship with the supplier. But I would also say that sometimes having the lowest price isn't the most important thing, and that's something that I really focus on. So I would prefer to pay a little bit extra to try and negotiate better payment terms. So back in February I was over in China, visited a few factories. We managed to negotiate terms 0% deposit and 100% balance on 60 days after shipping, which meant that we're getting 30 days worth of sales in Amazon before we have to pay for any of our stock. Now that is something that I'd much rather focus on than trying to get 1 or 2% extra profit on one product, because what that does is that allows me to free up my cash flow and allow me to order more stock so I can ship by sea rather than by air. I'll get cheaper prices potentially because I'm placing bigger orders, and I can order more stock, go into more marketplaces, launch into Europe if you're just in the US, for example, or even order more products from that same supplier. So although profit is very important, when you're trying to hammer down the suppliers to the lowest possible price, you must understand that they're probably going to find a way of making it cheaper, so spending less time, and you might lose some of the quality as well. So just be careful about trying to get the lowest price.
Yeah, and I'd also say educate yourself on the process so you actually know what is the lowest cost of those goods. I mean, don't just go to one supplier and ask what's your best price. You want to give the technical specification sheet to various different suppliers so you know what is the market price. If you know the price, if you're getting quoted 910, 913, 927, you know it's in that range, so you know like what is the bottom you can kind of negotiate to. I was going to say one other thing, but I just forgot. So I was saying that one. Yeah, so I gave an example today about exchange rates. I think that's very, very much overlooked. Don't just look at your product to try and get a better price. Analyze your exchange rates and notice how much your suppliers are benefiting by you paying them in US dollars as a result of the fluctuations in the exchange rate. So just really study that, and based on the value of your orders, you can get a massive, massive saving.
Yeah, and I think one other thing just is a tip to try and save money. So we've been using third-party warehouses to hold stock, just so we make sure we've got enough stock. We don't send it all to Amazon just because we know that the storage fees can be really, really expensive. So if you're not already looking into that, then I would, because we've managed to save a few percent on using third-party warehouses to store our product rather than sending it direct, especially during Q4 when the prices go up.
Are your warehouses in China or in the US or Europe?
Both. But yeah, we've got one in. I'm quite lucky in the UK. We've got one just down the road, so it's easy to visit. But we've got one in California and we've got one in China as well.
And just another thing that's sometimes just a fee for service rather than an ongoing clip of the ticket is just to get a sourcing agent just to give you their best quotes. So they often have their own little black book or some contacts, and even if you don't need to work with them long term, just that peace of mind that someone else who's well connected has gone out and got a few quotes for you as well, just to see if you're all in the same ballpark.
So in general, is it better to work via an agent or go directly to the manufacturer?
I've never used an agent long term, but when we were in Vietnam last week, we organised for someone to give us a country briefing, like what's Vietnam best at making, what should we watch out for, how does all the corruption and kickback stuff work, like just to understand the big picture. And then when you're dealing with individual suppliers, you know what questions to ask, what to look out for in factories, just sort of the local knowledge that it's pretty hard to pick up without living in the place for years. So I think they're useful for a one-off sort of download of what they know about the industry or that country, or traps for new players doing that kind of business. But long term, you don't really want a middleman. It's just an extra line that if it's key to your business, you own that supply chain. Your business lives and dies by your supply chain, so you really need to get to know your suppliers and really understand the process of how it's manufactured and just get in there yourself as well.
Yeah, so I would just add to that, it depends how you would determine a sourcing agent, because I use sourcing agents all the time. It's not necessarily to do the sourcing for me, because I come to China, again, building relationships with the suppliers. And anybody who my sourcing agent gets to me, I still have the relationship direct with the supplier. But what she is, well, we've got a few, but what they are is they're more eyes and ears on the ground here in China. They know where to get the best packaging from. They know where to get the best pricing for shipment. If you're ex-works, so inside in the country, shipping to get to the ports. And I look at them more of a logistics manager. And maybe if you're doing a bundle and you're consolidating 3-4 different items from different places, they can organise getting that all into one place. So although they get called sourcing agents, the majority of them do so much more than that, and they're worth their weight in gold. But all I would say is 100% have the direct relationship with the supplier, and what you'll probably find is that none of them will really have a problem with that, or none of the ones that I've met anyway.
Okay, great. So let's take another question from the audience. Let's see. So challenges and benefits sourcing in Vietnam and Cambodia. Sophie, do you want to take that?
Vietnam is my current favourite topic. I'm a complete Vietnam bore this week. But we had a really good trip. So the trade show was quite small, a lot smaller than here, but it was really just the tip of the iceberg of what Vietnam's good at making. And so you could see that if you did your research on leather goods or bags or some other things, Vietnam might even make better than China, I think. Certainly they've got some advantages there. I think, just going on the ground, and they're really keen to do business, so the negotiating works a bit back to front there. So they often, because they've been under this communist rule where they've been told you will manufacture this, and nobody has to sort of go out and do new product development or drum up customers. They're just given a job and told to do what their job is. They haven't had to really innovate or develop new ideas, so they're not very good at costing stuff, so they quote really high, but over time the cost should come down, whereas here you would, they would try and be really aggressive on their pricing to win the work. So as you do more business there, it should work more in your favour, but it's definitely somewhere really receptive to business. They're growing really fast. The people at the trade show were really flexible on order size. The pricing looked great. It's a good trading country. They've got busy ports. The shipping's comparable with China. Yeah, brilliant place. So really good quality products and really high standards and quality of workmanship. But the more labour intensive the product, the bigger advantage you've got in sourcing from Vietnam.
What kind of products are typically manufactured there?
So a lot of things like rattan, bamboo, silk, lots of leather. So any bags. So they make a lot of products. So some of the brands you might know that are made in Vietnam, things like Converse shoes, what else? North Face, all that outdoors gear, Osprey backpacks, Icebreaker, which is a big New Zealand merino brand. They've just moved from China to Vietnam for manufacturing. Apple gets all their electronics made there. It's a big place where there's a lot going on with big brands, but they're just doing it quite quietly.
I've got a nice little tip on how to find the best factories in Vietnam, or what I did anyway. I didn't really know how to source products in Vietnam because I've never done it before, but for example, on my backpacks, I use Duraflex buckles. Duraflex are like the market leader in terms of quality buckles. So I know the top brands like your North Face and your Ospreys and all that will also use Duraflex buckles. So I just contacted my contact at Duraflex in their Germany office, and I just said, I'm looking for some factories in Vietnam. Can you let me know the factories that you send your Duraflex buckles to? They gave me 3 factories, and they were 3 of the best factories I've ever worked with. So, and they were extremely organized. The Vietnamese factories were actually run by Koreans. They had about 2,000 workers, and they had several factories. It was, in China, I'm used to working in factories of 50, 100, 200, 300. But there was like 2,000. It was so organized. It was incredible.
What about Cambodia?
I've been there on holiday. I haven't sourced anything there, but I didn't spot anything Amazonable while I was on holiday, and I was looking a bit. I just think of another thing to do with Vietnam. We'll come back to it.
I'm going to pass on the Vietnam thing. I'm more China.
I've not actually done anything with Cambodia, but it sounds like fun.
Yeah. So how much demand is there for such kind of products on Amazon, like Rattan or Jute or eco-friendly? I mean, is there a lot of demand really for such products, handmade products?
You would have to do your research on the keywords, like the same as any other product opportunity. What's the demand level? Then validate that. What are the top sellers actually selling? And then do that search. What's on page one? How competitive would your product be on page one? Is it something that people would pay a premium for handmade, or a higher grade of leather, or more design factor, or oversize, or something that you could do differently and hold a high price that gives you a decent margin? So there's definitely demand. Sort of long term, there's probably more trends away from plastic and towards those natural materials that they make so well.
Okay, let's take another question. So if you were to draw a roadmap of the process of sourcing a product, what would the major junctions be?
How long have we got? I think the three main things really to focus on is how much time and attention that you actually want to give to sourcing your product from China, because this is what I really love, and I try to give all my time on this sort of journey. But I know that I understand that when you're running an Amazon business, like sourcing a product is just one aspect of it, and there's so many other things you need to put your attention on. But for me, the three things is like your online, first of all, your Alibaba and global sources, websites, and then coming to the trade shows, Canton Fair, global sources to really have the meetings, and then your factory visits as well, which is my favorite, and that's where you get the best amount of work done. So really just decide how much time you want to allocate to each of those processes, and your results kind of get better the more you sort of get closer to the factory. So the junctions, I mean, there's so many, but yeah, it just depends on like which approach you go for. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
I just like to really stick to the same product selection criteria, and actually over 5 years they haven't changed very much. So the one thing I'm absolutely inflexible on is low competition. I won't even go near middling competition. If it's middling when you research it, it's only going to get worse. And you haven't only got other private label sellers who are probably pretty dangerous competitors because they're very focused and they know what they're doing and often have been taught the same tactics and strategies. You've got the Chinese suppliers selling themselves, and you've got Amazon looking at what's coming in big volumes, and can they do that themselves? Now just remember the other thing I was going to mention about Vietnam, they've got a really strong ethic around not copying, so there's really strict paperwork as shipments leave the country, and so if you don't have the paperwork to say that's your brand, you won't get that thing out of the country. So nobody in Vietnam is going to knock off your designs, which is really good to know. So, yeah.
Okay, so this one's for Kian. How did you get the basketball players to license their brand to you to use them on products?
I sent a DM on Instagram.
That sounds simple.
That was about it, because I went to university for a year in Miami, 2008, 2009, and at the time one of the players there went on to play in the NBA, and I just saw that he got injured and he got out and played around in Europe for a while, and then he actually was just making some stuff in downtown LA, and he had the contacts with the NBA, so I just reached out to him, sent him a DM, explained what I've been doing for the last 8 years. I just said, look, I do this manufacturing in China, I can source really good products, I can get you good prices, why don't we attack this license together? You use your contacts within the NBA. So he got the NBA license, he used his players that he knew, who he was friends with, to really promote the product. I sourced it, and then we went and had, we did a trade show, we had meetings with Target, Walmart, Bed Bath & Beyond, and they liked my business partner, and they liked me about what we do in China, so it was quite easy, to be honest. But I think you just have to add a lot of value. Like, I just jumped in and said, hey, this is what I can really specialize in, this is what I can help you if. I never asked him anything, and then he asked me to LA for a meeting. And then from that, we did a good job, so then Neymar got involved, and then we got other licenses, and then started working with the players directly. So it just kind of spiraled from there. But just, find people who can help your business and just send a message. Everyone's accessible now through DMs. Just add value, don't expect anything in return, and then good things will happen.
Cool. Okay, so what's your approach to get the best payment terms in the medium-long term? Payment terms.
Yeah, so one thing about payment terms, what I would say is it's a lot more difficult when you're starting from scratch, you've never ordered from the supplier before, and if you've never met them and you don't really have that relationship. But what I tend to do is the first thing I do is I work out my sales forecast for the year. From that, you can work out how many units you're going to think you'll be selling each month. I put that into an order an order forecast and show that to my supplier, and just say, look, this is how much I think we're going to sell throughout the year, but cash on hand is this, and this is how much on the current terms is how much I think we can afford to order. Now, if you change the terms, this is how many I am going to order from you, and that's the combination thing. The main thing to remember is you've got to create a win-win situation. If you just go to your supplier and go, oh, can I have better terms? They're just going to say no. But if you really paint the picture and go, look, this is how it's going to benefit you. If you give me these terms, I can order 3 times the amount of stock from you. And whether that be in more stock, so you can ship by sea, for example, if you're currently running lean, or whether that's more stock so you can launch into the European marketplaces if you're just in the US, or just additional products. You just really need to paint the picture, the same way that we were talking about with the getting the cost of the units down as well. Paint that picture, show them the long-term gain that they're going to get, and just make it a no-brainer for them to accept what you want.
Can I just add something as well? Also just explain, what challenges you're facing in your business as well. So for example, the retailers that we work with, whether it's Tesco or Bed Bath & Beyond, they ask us for credit. I think Tesco are the worst, they ask for 120 days, some are 90 days, which is a nightmare. So you then can just put that back to your manufacturer to say, hey look, I'm faced with these awful payment terms to win the order, which I'm placing the order to you. I need your support as well. So if I'm going to give them 90 days credit, I also need 60 days credit from you as well. And that's the whole thing about working in partnership. They also want to support you because they're getting the order. And if they don't support you, then you might find that support somewhere else.
And just be a nice person as well. They get so many people that are so rude to them. And all my suppliers, they might say this to everyone, but they all tell me I'm their favourite client, and they all tell me how many of the other big boys they've just let me overtake in the production queue. And they send me lovely gifts, and I remember their birthdays, and I ask about their kids, and just that human interaction is best done in person when you make the effort to travel. But even before that, the first pass on, whatever instant messaging app or email correspondence you've got, the more they can warm to you and build that rapport with you as humans that want to do business long term and explain what your business is all about and how you want to grow your business, and just getting quotes for, you might be starting small, but ask what's the price break if I'm ordering 10,000 units. They start to sort of take you a bit more seriously. There's so many people turning up with the same little script, asking for everything on day one. If you take the time, you'll get a much better partnership than if you sort of rush and nag and bully and just sort of talk about numbers only. You need to be a bit more kind of warm and have a much more well-rounded relationship with them than that.
Okay, so we're going to take 2 more questions now. Can you provide some tips and resources for creating a well-rounded specs sheet or a tech pack, or a product specifications sheet, basically?
Quite often suppliers can prepare it for you. So like if you see a product that you like, just say, can you send me the full specification sheet for this product? And then they'll have nice pictures, they'll have the carton dimensions, how many go in the carton, what materials are used, and what's the thickness of the materials. And then you can just tweak that and adapt it to how you want it. And then, it's pretty simple. I don't think it needs too much detail. You just really want to provide a document with all the details, which is easily understandable for other manufacturers, and then you just kind of share that to get all your accurate pricing. And then what you really compare is a sample that comes as a result of that. So you have to definitely, you give them the information, but you have to see what they're capable of producing with that information. So you compare the prices, the spec sheet, and the samples.
Anyone else wants to add?
No, I think Kian pretty much covered it. But going back to his point before, if it's a spec sheet, for example, for the companies going to test the product for you, again, like Kian said in his talk earlier, just test that product yourself and make a list of all the things you want tested as well. Because unless you tell them which parts of the product to test, then they're probably not going to do that. So it's rigorous testing yourself for you to be able to work out what you like the quality testing to do.
And it's just so important to be very specific about everything, right? Materials and colors and stuff like that. So don't let your supplier assume anything on the spec sheet.
That was a very good point as well, especially about colours. A lot of people just say, I want the red fabric or I want the blue fabric. Specify the Pantone colour, give them as much detail as possible. Don't leave anything open to interpretation, because like there's 2 reds on the wall right there. You don't want your production being one or the other, but if you have a specific Pantone, then you can easily measure it. And the more detail it is, if you ever switch supplier for your next order or a year later, you give them the same Pantone and the same information, and it should always come back the same as how you requested it.
Okay, so this is going to be the last question. So can you give us an example of a new helpful tactic or tool you're using that we may not be aware of? So basically any tool or tactic that you think is really cool.
A tactic I like is really focusing on categories where most of the other private label sellers aren't, and where Amazon wouldn't do it themselves, and where Chinese manufacturers can't do it themselves. So some of my favourite categories that have given me a really easy tailwind just because nobody else is there are things like the food category and home decor. So there's a bit more paperwork with food, but my supplier for my tea who's worked for Starbucks already, they had it all there, just had to redo the front end really. And something like home decor, it's not for everyone. You've got to sort of back yourself with a little bit of design thinking and a bit of taste and interpreting what's already selling and coming up with a point of difference you think will sell. But a lot of people that are picking products by numbers on software tools, they're just not going to come up with the same products. And they're going to, there's whole courses out there teaching people how to hijack. So you just want to make yourself the least attractive target so that you've got the longest run with each successful product you launch. And so it might mean you need a few more of them. They're not the massive blockbuster big sellers, but you can build a really healthy portfolio that I've never been hijacked. When I ring Amazon, they say your metrics are stellar. They just, they've never blocked anything. I have a really easy run because I just sort of stay out of trouble. People don't put claims in against me. Nobody knows any of my products. They're just way under the radar. So that low competition and non-obvious and keep away from everyone else is definitely the trap for an easy life on Amazon.
Because just to lead on from that, you mentioned hijackers. Everyone's experienced hijackers in the room, right? No, apart from you. So basically, what we found was we were having real trouble with trying to get the hijackers gone, some of them. And you know what Amazon are like, they just don't want to help you at all. So what we found was we ordered all the hijackers' product, spent a lot of money on a credit card, ordered it all, took a hammer to it, smashed it all up and sent it back in as unfulfillable, and that managed to get rid of them. So if you wanna try and do that with your hijackers, then that's a tactic worth testing.
How about Kian?
It's not really a tactic, but something I just like to do is a lot of my manufacturers and guys that I work with are just genuinely my friends. So sometimes I just phone them up out of the blue and not talk about business, just phone them up, say, hi, how you doing, how's life, what's going on? And just, I was thinking about you, and it's just a nice thing to do. And then as a result, you build that relationship a little bit more. It's like, oh, they don't just phone me about business, they actually care about me as a person as well. So, and you always receive great benefits as a result of that as well. So just keep in touch.
Awesome, great. So I think some of the themes that have come out of the discussion are: one, diversify, don't focus only on China, and then build relationships with your supplier, be nice and talk to them and build that long-term relationship. And then go visit factories, visit trade shows, and just do some face-to-face interaction that really helps. Don't depend only on email. Great. Okay. Thank you so much, panelists. This has been wonderful. Thank you.